Voy a pedir disculpas de nuestros hermanos de Honduras. La mayoría de mi sermón en este servicio se realiza en inglés. Entonces voy a tratar de darles unos trocitos de vez en cuando para que tengan una idea más o menos por dónde vamos. We begin today what will be a series on faith development, how it is that we grow up in faith. And I want to start with a passage out of Paul's letter to the Ephesians. In his letter to the Ephesians in the 4th chapter, Paul uses some language that talks about his hope and his goal for the church at Ephesus. He says, then, after we come to the fullness of the full measure of let me just start there. Until we reach all unity in the faith. God gives various gifts. Sorry, I was running around here. God gives various gifts. Some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, the purpose of which is to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become more mature, attaining the full measure of the fullness of Christ. For then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves, blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and crafty, deceitful schemes of men. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into Him who is the head, that is Christ. Paul understands what some wise folks have described this way. Growing old is obligatory. Becoming mature is optional. Growing old is obligatory. Maturity is optional. You can be a 70-year-old curmudgeon stuck in a place of insecurity and hostility toward other people and never be able to live mature. You can be an 11-year-old going through a lethal and life-threatening illness and discover a level of maturity that some older people will never have. Maturity is optional. It requires dedicated, intentional effort to grow. That's what we're going to talk about. Madurar, envejecer es obligatorio, madurar es opcional. Uno puede envejecerse sin madurar, uno puede madurar sin envejecerse también. Growing up in faith, like learning how to play an instrument, comes in stages. And there are things that happen in our lives that can move us along in those stages. But there are also things that can happen in our lives that we can react to in ways that stick us in one stage out of which we never choose to emerge. We can get stuck doing scales and never risk the jazz. I want to talk today about how we look at this whole study and give some cautions as we get started, because there's a few things we need to be careful about when we look at a schematic diagram that creates stages, because the temptation is to look at it and go, oh, it's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, y así uno va avanzando paso a paso sin retroceder. But the reality is, for most of us, we don't go from step to step to step to step. We make advances, and then we may fall back and have to relearn a couple things. And then we make, hopefully, some other advances, and then we have to come back and integrate and re-examine some of that. Then we make a few more that process of gradually moving forward and coming back around to either recover and integrate or to relearn at a deeper level, that process has been articulated by some as a process of spiral dynamics. That you increase as you go through this spiral. Sometimes moving forward, sometimes having to come back and reintegrate and recover. So as we look at these stages of faith, I want you to look at them like that. Not as steps that you deliberately, once you get onto one, you never go back. But as parts of a process that we work through and integrate and discover and then reintegrate at a new level. So that's the first caution. It's not cut and dry. The second caution is to recognize what Thomas Aquinas said many, many, many years ago. He said, hearing is according to the hearer. Hearing is according to the hearer. This is how that works out. I give a sermon today, and every single one of you will take something different away from it. Why? Because some of the things I talk about, you might not understand. Because some of the things I talk about, you might not have experienced. Because some of the things I talk about, I might have used a vocabulary word that you don't understand at all. Which I do sometimes, unfortunately. Some of the things I talk about, you might disagree with and go out completely at odds with what I've said. And not able to hear any of the other things because you disagree so strongly with the first thing I said. Hearing is according to the hearer. Your filter, your life filter, allows certain things I say in to resonate and echo and be taken in and grow within you. And other things that I say to bounce off or to be completely ignored. So I don't expect everybody to walk out of here with the same reaction or the same content from what I share. Another thing that will affect what you hear is where you are in that faith development process. If I'm talking about something at a level 5 and you're still struggling in level 2, very unlikely that you're going to understand or grasp what I'm trying to talk about. It would be like Ramiro trying to tell me how to play jazz when I don't know how to read the notes yet. ¿Comprende? Es imposible asimilar enseñanza a un nivel acá cuando todavía estoy luchando para aprender en este nivel. Folks who study this faith development stuff say that most of us are able to, on a good day when we're really in our best self, on a good day we can access and have some understanding and compassion for the perspective of someone who is one step beyond where we are. One step. But when we start trying to deal with people who are 2 or 3 steps beyond us, our reactions tend to be to laugh at them as ridiculous, to call them heretics, or to perceive them as dangerous. Which is why people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Jesus were killed. Because they were perceived by people at lower levels of faith development to be a threat, a danger, not only to them, but to the whole structure of the society. So, it's hard. It's going to be hard to assimilate some of this as we move forward. And here's the last caution. We always tend to rank ourselves higher than we really are. So don't worry about that. Just don't be so worried about where am I, how good a student am I. Just listen, just absorb through the lens of your life what is helpful. As our friends in 12-step programs say, take what's useful and throw away the rest. No skin off my nose. Toma lo que te ayuda y tira lo que no te ayuda. All right? We got a deal? Can we all work on those? Okay. All right, great. So today, one last thing, just kind of in a general overall comment. Richard Rohr says, one of the things that we see as we look at all the different people who are creating schemes for human development, whether it's cognitive development, psychological development, emotional development, all these different religious faith development, all these different developmental efforts that are being made point toward something similar. They point toward integration or union. Rohr says it this way: growth is going somewhere, and the trajectory of growth is toward union. Union with self, the integration of my mind, my heart, and my body, so that all of them are working in concert, procurando la integración de mi organismo entero, mente, corazón y cuerpo. Union toward God, understanding ourselves as part of God and God as part of us. Jesus said it this way: I am in the Father and the Father is in me, and you are in me, which means you are also in the Father. See the union? We are all one. That's where Jesus points. That's where faith development points, is toward union with God. But it's not just union within myself and with God, but it's also union with others. La unión con los demás que están en mi alrededor. Cuando reconozco que tú eres también hijo, hija de Dios, que Dios también está presente en ti, entonces yo puedo unirme contigo sin miedo. Even if you're a Baptist, or a Muslim, or a Hindu, or a Baha'i, or a Jew, you don't need to be a source of fear. Now that's a hard message in a world, in a nation like ours that is frenetically fearful of Islam right now. I had a conversation just the other day with some folks who were all worried about this, and I just said, you know, they're part of us. They are part of our whole, and we got to try to understand one another. And those were words that made them mad, because they're dealing with that at a faith development level here that doesn't understand the union piece. It's us or them. So growth is toward union. Integration, me in myself, with God, with others, and with the world and the cosmos, to understand that we are part of the bigger whole, that all of us is a very small piece of, very, very, very small piece of a much bigger whole. So, with those as kind of introductory words, I want to launch into a brief presentation around the first stage of faith development. And the first stage of faith development corresponds also to the first stage of psychological or cognitive development, as Piaget articulated it. Piaget, who laid a foundation of 4 kind of levels of cognitive development. The first one is sensory motor. El primer nivel de desarrollo es sensorial y motor. So what that means is, when I am a 0 to 2-year-old, my big job in the world is to figure out how to use my 5 senses, how to learn how to see and taste and touch and smell, and what's the other one? Hear. And I'm supposed to learn how to use my body. We don't come out knowing how to use this body. You ever see a little baby infant? They don't do much. They don't do much. They lay there. They're learning how to breathe. They're learning how to use their eyeballs, which can only focus about this far, from the breast to the eye. It's about as far as they can focus. It's a good thing, because that's kind of the first focal length that they need to be, they need to know that face. They need to use their hands. Have you ever watched a brand new baby just doing this? They're learning how to use all those muscles. They've never done it before. They're trying to figure it out. That's their work. That's what they're trying to figure out. Their body is their self. But they don't even recognize that their body is different from mom's body, or your body, or Tia or Dad's body. It's all one big hole. They kind of are born in this hole. They come out of this. They were part of another thing, and they come out and they're still part of another thing, and it all feels like it all goes together. You know they're moving into the next stage when they do this at about 2 years old? No. That's when they figured out that I stop here and you start there. All right? What I think in my head is not what you're thinking in your head. You're telling me I can't eat that cookie, and I'm telling me I can eat that cookie. That's the beginning of the next stage. So, ¿qué hacemos durante esos primeros 2 años para cultivar fe en criaturas tan pequeñas? So what is the faith task? What is the faith development task? The foundational layer of faith development that we lay. It's security, trust, and love. Security, trust, and love. Seguridad, confianza y amor. El primer nivel. And how do we do that? We do that by holding babies. We do that by talking to babies. We do that by feeding babies. We do that by keeping babies warm and protected. We do that by making sure babies experience the world to be a place that loves them and cares for them. A place that is trustworthy. Cultivamos estas cosas en los niños, creando espacios de seguridad y de confianza y de amor. And if you do that with a child, if a child experiences their first 2 years of life to be full of love and tenderness and touch and enough food, enough nourishment, enough warmth, enough care, then we're laying the foundational level that enables a person, as they grow, to move into the world with a sense of confidence, a sense of trust in the universe, and eventually in God. It's why we have a nursery for little babies to be in. When they're in worship and they're not happy, they can be there and they can feel like it's an environment where they can do whatever they need to do. Poop or pee or cry or scream, whatever they need to do, they can do it there and it's okay. People don't get mad at them. They're able to be themselves. That's how you lay the foundational level. The faith lesson that is learned is that the universe is a place I can trust. And the one who made the universe is a person I can trust. Is a God I can trust. But it doesn't always work out that way. It doesn't always work out that way. Some babies, instead of experiencing that, experience insecurity and hunger and sadly violence. And when that's the case, cuando en lugar de seguridad, confianza y amor reciben desconfianza, inseguridad y violencia, they get stuck at that level, trying to cover and recover what was not given at the early years. And so children are grabbing for anything they can get because they don't know if they're going to have food. Or even when food becomes stable, they still are insecure about its provision. In the faith journey, it is possible for grown people to be stuck at stage 1, where they are insecure about the nature of the universe and its capacity to provide for them. Es posible ser un adulto que no confía todavía en seguridad, confianza, amor, proveído por el universo. It's possible to get stuck, and when we get stuck, what happens is our whole lives become focused around making sure those basic needs get met all the time. Security, love, and trust. People are distrusting and always trying to protect themselves. People are always creating boundaries of security around them. They're unwilling to reach out in new relationships. If somebody else comes in, they're always viewed as a threat. Basic needs are not secure. And when basic needs are not secure, when there's not that confidence that God is able, and the universe that God made is able to give me what I need to be essentially secure, I live in a stuck place. What is it that moves us eventually from that place? Having those needs satisfied in a way that essentially finally confirms to us, I don't need to keep worrying about where the next meal will come from. I don't need to keep worrying about whether I will be loved or not. I don't need to keep worrying about whether the people around me are essentially trustworthy or not. Only when that happens can we move forward. Only then. How many of you saw the movie The Help? ¿Cuántos vieron la película The Help? There's a beautiful little ritual that is part of the caregiving that the African American nanny gives to this very small little Anglo girl, whose mother is essentially not a mother who communicates love and trust and security to her baby. She keeps leaving her and not paying attention to her and pushing her to the side. And so whenever that happens, this African-American nanny grabs the little girl, picks her up, brings her to a place where she can kneel down and look her in the eye. And I don't remember exactly the words, but it's something like, you is smart, you is beautiful, you is intelligent, you is caring. And would just impart to this child that fundamental, essential stuff that makes it possible for them to have a solid foundational layer underneath them. We need to know those things. And until we do, we can't move forward. And that brings me to Hosea. Hosea is describing, much later in the prophetic period of time, the very beginnings of the relationship between God and Israel. When Israel was a child, I loved him. When out of Egypt I called my son. With language of a parent who is taking care of a toddler, Hosea reminds Israel how God laid a foundation of trust. Está recordando a Israel cómo Dios hizo un fundamento de confianza, seguridad y amor. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms. But they didn't realize it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love. I lifted the yoke from their neck. I bent down to feed them. In the beginning of Israel's faith, they are coming out of an insecure, unloved, dangerous experience of oppression. And God has to reteach the basic lessons of trust, security, and love. Is this God capable of protecting us not only from the angel of death, but from Pharaoh's armies that are now coming after us? Is this God able to protect us from the dangerous waters in front of us? Is this God able to protect us from the cold nights in the desert and the hot sun in the day? Is this God able to provide food and water for us in a precarious environment? And God, in every instance, confirms trust, love, and security. That's how we start. That's how it begins. That's how it begins for Israel. And that's how it begins for us. So as we grow in faith, it's good to be reminded how it is we must start. Because only when we have the sense of security that Israel developed, that God is, in fact, able to provide trust, security, and love to us, and that we are the agents of that provision, can we begin to move beyond the basics to the next levels of faith development. So it's important. It's important how we take care of those little infants. Es importante cómo cuidamos a los infantes que vienen a estar con nosotros en el culto. Es importante que reconocemos el valor del cariño, el valor de la intimidad, de los besitos, de los susurros de amor. All of that is essential to raising a child up to be a person of faith. Let us pray. Amoroso Dios, tú que tomaste por la mano de la mano de Israel, tú que deseas proveer a nosotros los elementos fundamentales de seguridad, confianza y amor, ayúdanos como instrumentos tuyos a proveer a los que están en nuestro derredor las mismas cosas, para que nuestra confianza en ti quede sentado y seguro, para que no tengamos miedo ni del pasado, ni del presente, ni del futuro, porque vivimos dentro de un mundo sobre el cual eres soberano y dentro del cual trabajas continuamente para conferir a nosotros seguridad, confianza y amor. Por Cristo te lo pedimos.